Hey guys, welcome to another Thursday Q&A. My name is Tony Martin. I'm author of howtogetthejob.blog, and I will be your shepherd for the next 30 minutes or so as we talk a little bit about some questions I got this week on resume writing and some interviewing questions, as well as some application questions. So looking forward to answering those. And also, as always, you can follow me on Facebook, on Instagram, both things on Hired, How to Get the Job. You can take a look at my blog. And if you want to learn more about me, certainly I go to my Facebook page. There's an article, or I should say a video that's a little bit overview of me and my background. So with that, I first wanted to get started and talk a little bit about resume formats. Now, this is an exciting topic, I know, but this is actually kind of an interesting one because Google is wrong, okay? If you read a Google article, they're gonna tell you almost exactly the opposite of what I think. But it goes back then to what I always say, which is your advice is only as good as who you get it from, and nothing trumps the hiring manager. So if you are applying to Google, then ignore the next 1 minute of my dialogue. If you're not applying to Google, then this is probably pretty good information. But truthfully, most of that article that my wife found actually this week and sent to me was really what I consistently say when it comes to length of bullets and things like that. So with that, the question or the topics around PDF formats for resumes and Word documents. And when's it correct to actually submit a PDF or send off a Word or whatever the case may be, because as a staffing recruiting manager, I got all different types. So my general feeling is this: when you are emailing a resume to anybody, you should email a PDF version of your resume. It can't be edited, it can't be changed, or at least not without difficulty. So that's my general advice around that. Now, when you're submitting a resume to an applicant tracking system on a company's career page, this is where me and Google have a big problem. I believe you should use a Word document. And often, here's why. I've used several applicant tracking systems in my career. And whenever a Word document is uploaded, the Word document actually gets parsed correctly, and you can actually see it as an applicant. So when you upload your Word document, you go to the next screen on the applicant tracking system, and you then see everything is filled out correctly. The automatic form filled out appropriately. That's fantastic. But when you send a PDF version into an applicant tracking system and you click next, often things are wrong. Under experience, it'll have your diploma. Under contact information, it'll have a company's contact information. PDF documents just don't parse that well. And to be truthful too, on the other side, as a recruiter, when we see it, doesn't parse well on that side either. So just because it looks like it's wrong on the candidate side, it's also wrong often on the company side. And I guess a good example of this too is that you'll how easy is it for you to convert a PDF to a Word? You can do it, but then there's a whole bunch of boxes. It looks weird. It's kind of funky, and as a result, it's not right. So my general advice is when you're applying to a company on the careers page, upload a Word document. It'll parse well. When you're emailing a resume, when you're sending a resume to somebody, use the PDF. Now, again, if you're applying to Google, follow their rules because they get about 2 million resumes a year, and they only have about 100,000 people that work there. So you got to follow the rules of the company you're hiring into. And with that, always be looking on LinkedIn or different platforms, frankly, for their recruiting team and their advice and tips and tricks. Because for popular companies like Google, there's bound to be tips and tricks to help you get your resume noticed. So that's what I wanted to say there. Now, as always, if you have a question, put it in the comment box while I'm talking for the next 25, 30 minutes. I'll try to answer your question. If otherwise, I got questions this week, as I always do, as I'm working with clients on the resume side, on the interviewing side, and I always want to make sure I answer those as well. So First of all, this is a fairly long question. I'm going to paraphrase it. It's from Joel in Richton, Mississippi, and it's regarding applications. And essentially, he was saying that it seems like now companies, regardless of your practical industry and specific job experience and specialty, they want you to have a degree. This is especially true when it comes to consulting. I have 25 years of experience in safety, but the company that I couldn't even apply to had hired a 22-year-old with a horticultural degree over me and my resume. So his question is that, is there a way to get around this? If a company says they require a degree, is there a way to get around it? Truthfully, no. Now, it's a really good question because I've actually worked with a client this week who has been a VP for more than 20 years of his career. He's been several companies and he's always been a VP or level since 2000. He doesn't have a degree. And I know that he is somewhat sensitive about it because we've talked about it. It bothers him that he doesn't have a degree, but he's got so much experience. So we're obviously, as I'm crafting his resume with him, making sure that his experience shines through. And then the fact that he doesn't have a degree isn't a big deal. And I've worked for companies, frankly, where we've been able to hire guys without degrees, but it was only after the hiring manager and the VP fell in love with that person. Prior to that, they were like, absolutely, I don't want to hire anybody without a degree. So truthfully, Joel, I would say two things. One, if you've been doing the same thing for 20, 25 years, your reputation is going to precede you. So for everyone who's young, who's watching this, realize your reputation precedes you. And what you do to build a good reputation or bad reputation will lead the way when your application comes. So make sure you're building a good reputation. In Joel's case, I'm sure he is. I will say one thing for you, Joel, because when you sent me this message, now again, I say this with full humility. Anybody who knows me knows that I have a very strong weakness, and this is the weakness. I am a typo king, okay? I prefer doing this because I feel like I can think quicker on my feet than I can type. And I type pretty fast, but I skip words when I'm typing and it just looks ridiculous. So with that, you sent me an email or I should say a message that was pretty long, but there were a few typos in here. Now, if your resume has typos in it and you want to be a consultant, that's going to be a big challenge and a big hurdle for you to overcome. And I'm not saying your resume is filled with typos, and when you're instant messaging me, that's a much more casual form of conversation. So I'm not holding you to that same standard, but I do want to make you aware that make sure there's no typos in your resume. Make sure there's no typos in anything you submit to a company. I have to proofread things 1,000 times and I still get it wrong. And anyone that's ever worked with me, they told me I had Tony Ebonics because my language skills when it comes to typing were just way too quick. But for Joel's case though, so that's the first thing. Second thing is that hopefully most companies have a decent recruiting team or person. And let me give you guys a little behind the scenes of what happens when a job description is being created. So typically a hiring manager will say, I want to hire call him an SAP programmer or something for their IT department. Now, he's going to have a job description that he created with his technical experts. And it's always going to say bachelor's degree required. Always, because they're technical people. And I would often go into that hiring manager, who is obviously the CFO or often the CFO, and he'd ask me, this is what we're looking for. What do you think? And I'd say, well, let's go through your job description. And I'd close the door. And I would sit down with him and we'd go through his job description. And I'd say, what's required? He's like, well, I require this and this. And I'd always get to the point of the bachelor's degree. And I'd say, okay, look at your team out there. And he'd say, okay, who's your best performer? Who's your top 2 or 3? And he'd be like, Mike, Joel, and Steve. They're my best performers. And I'd be like, okay, well, do all 3 of them have bachelor's degree? Well, Steve doesn't and Joel doesn't, but they're really, really good and I really want one. I'm like, but your best performers out of your team of 10 don't even have what you're trying to accomplish here. So everyone's got a specific story. So I would coach them through and often say, well, we're going to keep it on here, but we're going to make sure that that I'm not going to use that as a disqualifier because maybe someone has the amount of experience. So It's a really long answer for you, Joel, but the truth is that for consultants, it's really tough to get around the whole bachelor's degree thing. If they hired a guy who's 20 or a girl who's 22 years old with a horticultural degree, I got to imagine they didn't want to pay you either, and they wanted to pay someone a lot less than what you were looking for. So I would say that's probably part of the case too. But but yeah, watch your typos. And I am the typo king, as one of my friends, Steve Thomas, delightfully just recognized on the comments here. and yeah, and I think he asked a question too, but if Steve, if you asked a question, feel free to type it again because I missed it. All right, so now Jessica from Houston asked for resumes. What do you think the resume will look like 5 years from now? Now, this was interesting. I got this earlier this week, and my wife and I totally disagree. Now, my wife's a VP of HR, so and I'm just a recruiting guy, so I probably believe her more than me. But she believes they're going to be more of a video resume, and I don't really believe that. I think ultimately where we're going 5 years from now, which isn't that long ago, we 5 years ago, we didn't have Uber. So, and I guess we still don't have Uber today now with the Corona thing, but in general, we have Uber. And we didn't have that 5 years ago, so a lot happens in 5 years. But I don't think necessarily we're going to a video-based interviewing or resume system. I think you're still going to be doing the same thing. I mean, we've always had video applications to get into college. I mean, what was that, Legally Blonde? She had to do a video application to get into Harvard, or she didn't have to, but she chose to. So there's always going to be an option there. But I think what's going to happen in the future is we're going to be really more reliant on our social media. I mean, you can see it right now. You can apply to most jobs on LinkedIn through LinkedIn. Now, many applicant tracking systems will make you go to the company website because they want to track their own matrix information. And I know like RigZone has a really good website for data and pulling in who's coming from who, what are their backgrounds. But when I was at a deep water drilling company, we wanted them to come through our own system. So, and now let me just come quickly see if this is an actual question or a funny one. Yes, okay, so Steve says, I heard that if a candidate is interviewing with me and he quotes Seinfeld or The Office, that they're in. Will you make sure they get the job? Is that true? So anyone that knows me knows I'm a passionate fan of Seinfeld and The Office. So it's not true. However, you make a good point, Steve. Whoever you're talking with, you want to make sure that you interact with them, and to the best of your ability, you get to know them. So if you're interviewing with someone, check them out on LinkedIn, check them out on Facebook, see what they're excited about, see what they're passionate about, see where they went to school. One of the guys I interviewed with this week who is now on his third interview, which is great. We did a mock interview Monday. He nailed it. Wednesday, I think, was his next one, and now he's got another one today or tomorrow, but he's killing it. And the person went to Texas Tech and he went to A&M. And I said, look at the LinkedIn profile. Make a joke about that. Be like, hey, I don't know if I could talk to you because you're a Red Raider and I was Nagy. Something, but it'll calm you down by making a joke, and it'll also calm the interviewer down. They won't be stressed out, but it'll create a rapport there that they can relate with. Because when you're interviewing, let's be honest, we want to work with people we like getting along with. We don't want to work with robots. So anyway, I digress there, but Steve, I appreciate the funny comment. Keep them coming. Anyone else, you got a question, put them in there just like Steve Thomas did, and I'll be happy to answer them. So getting back to this resume of the future thing, though, I really think our social media is going to play a bigger factor in it, because right now we can apply through LinkedIn to jobs. We can apply through different websites to jobs. So I would say that as you are applying to places, make sure that your social media backs up your story. Make sure it doesn't contradict your story. Make sure your resume doesn't say you've been with something from 05 to 15 and your LinkedIn says you were there from 04 to 13. Make sure everything plays a part, because that's what we do, is we want to double check everything. And that's some low-hanging fruit. Okay, next question was Sarah from Sugarland. I was told by a company I am interviewing that they do motivational interviewing. Can you tell me what that is? So motivational interviewing, what that is, well, let me first it's kind of a spin-off of emotional intelligence and behavioral-based interviewing, okay? So if you've ever done that, that's I went over it last week. Tell me about a time when you were unfairly criticized, when you said something you later regretted, and I got lots of stories about things I later regretted. But either way, tell me about those sort of things. That's emotional interviewing, emotional intelligence, behavioral-based, where there's obviously a way you're gonna go. Okay, I have asked you a question about something you are not proud of. And now I'm asking you to tell me about a time that you're not proud of something. I'm leading you in the path, you know what you got to do. Motivational interviewing is going to be more to make sure you're a cultural fit. So that's a situation where they're going to say, hey, what kind of environment do you work best in? Now, you can go, well, I work really well when I'm in a team environment. You can say, well, I work better as a lone wolf. You don't know really what I'm looking for unless you've really done your homework and you realize this is a team environment. That's why when I coach companies on cultural fits and creating their position descriptions, I always tell them, never put in those behavioral cues in the job description. If you do that, you are ensuring that a smart candidate who might not be a fit is actually looking at a roadmap on how now to be a fit to answer your questions. So you should never say in a job description, we're looking for a team player who's got an entrepreneurial spirit. Because then when the first question of the interview is what kind of person how would you describe yourself? Well, I'm a team player and I have a really strong entrepreneurial spirit and I love, building things. And well, crap, I don't know if that's real or not, or if you just said it because you read it in the job description. So your job description should tell you more, but also leave out things that you're gonna be using to vet candidates later. So with that, again, so when it comes to motivational interviewing, that is specifically about saying, what is the most stressful environment you've ever worked in and why? Again, you don't know, so you're gonna have to tell me the truth here and say, look, I was really stressed out when I worked for Darlene Dawson because she was a difficult boss and she was really mean to me all the time and she was unfair to me, and I'm gonna lay out this story. Now you, Cameron Dickey, are gonna be able to realize very quickly if the story I'm laying out is gonna be a similar experience I'm gonna have here at your company, or if it's gonna be different. Because that's the point of the motivational interviewing, is to figure out where the candidate works best. It's not saying he can't work well in that environment, but you just know your story. You know your company's story, and you don't want to lead the candidate down a path. So I hope that helps Sarah about that. But the motivational interviewing, the best advice for that is just be honest. Because truthfully, if you pretend you're something you're not, or you're if you're in the middle of the fence, let's just say, what kind of environment do you work best in? I love working in teams, but I'm also great at projects by myself. Sometimes I have my best success when I'm a lone wolf, but other people will say I really get motivated and inspired by a team. That told me absolutely nothing. It told me that you are vanilla and you don't actually know, or you're not telling me the truth. Because we all work better in one way or another. And you can certainly say, this is the way I really prefer. However, I've worked in this other area and I've also been able to excel. But I'm really passionate about working with team and feeding off their energy, or whatever the case may be, something like that. All right, next, James and Galveston. Do you think the skills section of a resume are relevant? Now, if you're saying the top, so on a resume you have, your objective, which I think your objective is to get the job. So I think putting an objective on top of your resume is kind of worthless. And when you do that, I think you're just filling up a resume with 3 or 4 lines of words that don't matter, because at the end of the day, it's your objective. I always put a professional summary on there, which might say I have 20 years of sales and VP experience with a passion for marketing and leading people. That told me something. That was actually relevant. I know you have 20 years of experience. I know you like leading people. But I happen to have a resume here because I was ready for this. And this is the example of a skills section. Let me see if I can see it right there. So it's and there's some notes there, and I think it's backwards, so you can't really see it. But bottom line is the second to top thing on the resume. And on this, it says marketing skills, profit loss management, capital management, strategic planning, client presentations. This is better than most, to be honest with you. And I'm working on this resume right now for a client, so I can't be too hard on it. But this is better than most, but often I'll see, motivated, self-starter, hardworking. That is worthless under skills, okay? Because obviously you're going to say that you're a hard worker. No one is ever going to put I'm a sloth on a resume. So don't even worry about the skills section. What I do when I get a skills section, like with this resume, I got the skills section, I'm reformatting it, and I'm working for my client. What I told him is I'm going to keep it right there to make sure that we incorporate each one of those things into a bullet below. But to waste 5 or 6 lines and then a skills bold print, it takes away from your resume, to be honest with you. Now, the only exception to this that I really feel is probably a relevant exception is if you're an engineer, if you're a computer geek. I'll say that with love. I wish I was one. I don't know very well what I'm doing with computers half the time. Hence why the first time I did one of these Facebook Lives, I did it on my personal side, not my business side. So, but anyway, if you're a computer person and you have certain software, yes, put that in there because you want that stuff to be on top. You want an applicant tracking system is going to find it wherever it is in your resume, but it makes it a lot easier for the recruiter to find it. And if you know you're applying to a job where they say you must have SAP experience and you have to have worked with the MM, PM, WM, those are all different modules in SAP, and you had to have worked in those, then put those on your resume on the top and figure out a way to make sure it stands out. Yes, absolutely. But it's really based on the job description. But in general, for professionals who are not technically proficient in one thing, but we're leaders, we're managers, we're salespeople, we're account managers, we do things like that, the skills section, I feel, again, my opinion, is kind of worthless. I feel like it's just wasting your time. All right. So then we had, so this is kind of, I guess, a bonus section here. So there's a different client I'm working with this week. And I thought it was really relevant because I see it a lot. And this isn't actually a question I got. But again, as always, you got a question, pop them in. His resume would tell his story. And I don't mean it was just like I worked here, then I worked there. He actually said, I joined this company because my VP from so-and-so recruited me into it. That was actually a bullet. And then the last bullet would be, I left because the company merged with so-and-so and I was laid off. So you have to imagine, in this case, this guy, he's been doing this for a long time. And he's got, I want to say 7 or 8 companies over the course of 30 years in his background. So that is 14 at least bullets of why he joined and why he exited. So that's 14 bullets, which is making his resume 14 lines longer. Maybe 28 lines longer because they might be 2-line bullets. And always, if your bullet goes over by 1 word, shrink it down to suck it back up so it's just a 1-line bullet. If you're going to make it a 2-line bullet, then make sure you have 2 lines worth of valid information. I, as a personal note too, never put periods at the end of bullets because sometimes that one little, it's not a sentence, it's a bullet. And sometimes that period can cause you to go over to an extra line. So little helpful tip there. But so with his story, he was telling a story on his resume. And I really had to reel him back in and say, look, this resume doesn't have to be a story. We don't need to go into why you left. You got to leave something for dinner. I mean, you have to leave something for the hiring manager to ask you about. So you want to control the narrative. And I can certainly see that if you've jumped from job to job and you've done some of that in your past or your present, that there's a need to justify why you're moving from one thing to another, but then use that time in your cover letter if you're going to do a cover letter. Use that time in the relationships you're building with when you're trying to solicit the advice of the experts in the company. Like we talked about last week when you're cold calling your resume and you're sending it out to companies and then you follow up with them with LinkedIn messages. And if you didn't see it last week, check it out because it was a really good tips on how to get your resume out there and get a better response rate. So make sure you do that. But in this case, certainly make sure. I got my naked daughter is over here, so I got distracted all of a sudden. Forgive me. This is real life homeschooling in full effect. So I lost my train of thought. But with that, just make sure that at the end of the day, your resume doesn't quite tell the story that much. You just want it to be accomplishments and notable accomplishments. And try, if you're only using half a line, try to figure out how to add value by using a full line. If you're using a line and a half, either shrink it back up to be 1 line or bring more value in by making it 2 lines. All right. And then my last question that I had prepared and was brought today is on price. So I get this question a lot, which is, what is it? And this is actually from Howard in Thailand, who I talked with earlier this week. He said, hey, how much does it cost for you to do my resume? And I'm going to be very honest. here, which probably is terrible marketing. It just depends, okay? Truthfully, I will do my best to never charge more than $150 or $200 for someone that is brand new to the workforce, entry level, graduating college. I don't care how many hours of work it's going to take me and you to work on your resume together. I just know you can't afford it, and it's my way of giving back. When I do professional resumes that are engineers and people who have a VP who have been in the workforce longer, it can range all the way up to $500 right now. And obviously everything is based on time, value, composition, and how much time is available. So the more resumes I get, the more demand I get, then might fluctuate my prices a little bit, so I can make sure that I can then meet the need and demand of my clients. But with that, so I think that's it. If there's any other questions, feel free to put them on there. I got a few extra minutes here. But with that, I really appreciate everyone tuning in to my different messages on Facebook, LinkedIn, Instagram, all that stuff. As always go there for new content, new information. Feel free to email me with any questions you might have, and I will make sure that they get answered. So with that, hearing no objections, I hope everyone has a great rest of your week and a good weekend. Stay safe. Bye.